over here so I don't watch myself in stereo.
Yeah,
No need for that. One of me is plenty.
that's the way I feel about me.
Well, Gary Frey, thank you so much for being here, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Alan, it's a pleasure. It's good to be with you.
Awesome. So I put out a post. I don't know. I want to say it was 3.5 weeks ago. I put out a post and I said, I want to do something that I've never done before. If there are people that you know are not currently in my network that I need to meet and are
Ah,
great at networking, please introduce me to them. And
Darren
our
Saul.
our mutual friend Darren Saul answered the call.
That's so awesome.
He's such a good dude. But
Yeah.
thank you, Darren, for making this happen, making this introduction, and getting Gary and I connected. So that message that I put out there, Gary, where I said I want to meet somebody who's phenomenal at networking, somebody who's really good at networking. What, in your opinion, made Darren think of you?
Probably because we probably had breakfast at 7:30 that morning as part of our mastermind. Problem awareness. Awareness is the number one thing. It's funny because when he and I and some other guys, there are 6 of us in this mastermind. I think 4 of the 6 of us were unemployed.
Okay.
And when you're unemployed, you better be connecting with people because, Cheetos and Oprah reruns are not going to serve you very well. And so I've had to do that a lot. And I don't like calling it networking because it feels so transactional. I genuinely love connecting with people, and to where it's not about what can you do for me, and as long as you can do something for me, then it's good. Apologize, our landscaper guy decides he's got a mow today, so
All good. It's all good.
But anyway, I mean, when I came back to this city that I love, 704 Charlotte, 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, I had just finished a turnaround. I had lost pretty much everything in 2009 when our private equity firm blew up. And so my wife and I said, we want to come back down to Charlotte. We were doing 13 winters in Cleveland, Ohio was enough. And we were ready to come back home. No offense to my friends in Cleveland. But, Joseph spent 13 years in an Egyptian prison, and I spent 13 winters in Cleveland, and that was enough. And so I wanted to come back to Charlotte. The problem is people, my background doesn't fit any. I've run a number of companies, done some turnarounds, I've been in 2 Fortune 500s, and I don't fit. And at the time I was 53, so I'm now 59. Well, a 53-year-old guy that's been president of a few or 4 companies, people are like, well, you're going to have to be president to be happy. No, that's not true. Or they thought of me as a marketing guy. They didn't know about my private equity background. They didn't know about any of that, my friends back here. So I had to just start ground zero and just say, hey, would you be willing to meet with me? Let me tell you my story. And if it resonates, would you connect me to somebody that it might resonate? And I'm not going to embarrass you, and I'm not going to ask you for a job. I'm not asking them for a job. I really tried to approach it like a treasure hunt. And it was a high risk treasure hunt because I didn't have a safety net. I had, we were moving back to Charlotte, whether we had a job or not. And the only question was, are we buying a house or are we putting everything in storage? That's it. And hopefully, if we didn't have a job, somebody would give us, a place that we could rent with both of us being unemployed. Who knows?
Right.
But it was a high risk thing. But I really tried to look at it as this adventure when I wasn't, terrified and white knuckled about it. But I really tried, because I do love connecting with people. And I really tried to go into it like, hey, is there any way I can help you? Can I connect you to somebody else. You know, is there any way I can serve you? It helps get your eyes off yourself anyway if you do that.
Yep.
So that was kind of my thing, and it was just amazing. What started as a 2-week, hey honey, let me burn up my Marriott points and let's spend 2 weeks trying to connect with people, turned into 3 of those two-week stints, and I met with 90 people in 6 weeks. And the last day at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, I get an offer. And then the guy that tells me, he's like, you are the last one. I had to get special dispensation from Los Angeles to make this hire because we just put in a hiring freeze.
Oh, wow. Wow.
No kidding. I mean, like,
and that came through the networking. That came through the networking that you had been doing. That's how you met that individual.
Yeah. And it was funny because I didn't want to even go meet with this person that somebody's like, you need to go meet. And it was Melissa DeBoer. I didn't know Melissa, but it was an accounting and finance company that had spun off of Deloitte. I didn't know anything about them. And I'm like, I'm not an accounting and finance guy. But I went because somebody said, hey, I think you'd need to meet her. So I went and met her. And then as we met, she goes, oh, by the way, you need to meet Andy Johnstone, our managing director. He's here. Okay. So we hit it off. And then we found out that we actually had a lot of commonality and this and that. And he's like, hey, can you meet next week? And I said, I'm actually heading back to Ohio. How about the following? And he's like, that'd be great. And a series of meetings over those next 2-week periods led to it, which was really cool.
That's very cool. So there's so much in what you just said, Gary, but I think one of the things I want to start with was at the very beginning of what you just commented on. You said that you were unemployed and you didn't want the unemployment to be the reason that you were connecting with people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking for a job. And I think that's so critical for people to understand when they're unemployed. But how did you do that? I mean, what did you feel like you would have to offer people being unemployed that they may take advantage of?
You know, that's a great question. I am a natural connector of people. I've built companies by hearing somebody else's story and saying, hey, do you know so-and-so? No, I don't. You guys need to meet, and here's why. And then having worked with a bunch of really high net worth families, like some billionaires and, you know, owners of pro sports teams and whatever. Well, they don't need another friend, but they don't know who they can trust because, quite frankly, they can't trust very many people because everybody wants something from them. And so I learned, especially in those years from 2004 when I invested in the company, when I had some money, to through 2009 when the thing blew up. But then I stayed in the ring really until 2017, serving a lot of those folks that we all had investments that had blown up, and we had some things that were still kind of languishing and hanging on. And what I found is if you go in to serve and you listen, many times you can. You know, especially even if you've not been around the block as long as I have, a lot of times, you know, if you prove yourself to be trustworthy and you really do go in to serve, opportunities avail themselves. I remember when our firm was blown up, our vice chairman, who had been the treasurer of Walmart, like everybody in Bentonville, Arkansas, in that area knows him. Great guy. We were getting bad news like repeatedly in early 2009. Like it was bad. It was repeatedly, our leadership team meeting was just terrible. And we were all over. We had 9 or 11 offices around the country. And he would go, you know what, I'm kind of done. Even though he was not the CEO and chairman, he was vice chairman. He's like, I got to go serve somebody. I got to get my eyes off of me. And he was dead serious about it. And he just like, I'm done. You guys finish up. And he had to go figure out how can he serve somebody. And there's something that's a blessing in that. Finding and just keeping your eyes open. It may be as simple as somebody's struggling to open a heavy door. I mean, we've got these banks here in Charlotte that some of the doors, you better be strong and lifting weights to open the door, like
Right.
open the door for somebody, I mean, that's
Right.
a way to serve somebody. You never know.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think it's so hard for people to understand. I mean, I'm in the recruiting world, and, one of the questions that I ask people when they're unemployed is, what did you do during your unemployment? And it seems
Yeah.
weird. And people oftentimes they get offended by it. Well, all I've been doing is looking for a job. No, I get that. I understand that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
was there anything else in addition to that? I don't mean it in a condescending way in any way,
Yes.
but there's something about doing that helps motivate you to get out of bed every day and go, versus just
Yes.
sitting there and wallowing in sadness.
Yeah. And man, I tell you what, one of the most depressing things you can do is apply online. And quite frankly, if you're a non-traditional career path guy like me,
Right.
the artificial intelligence is going to kick you out. You're never going to see the light of day with a human being. Every job. I've been writing a book, and I don't know if anybody's ever going to want to even read it, but it's part of my journey, but it's really about helping people understand, kind of silence the imposter syndrome and understand where they fit. Because I had plenty of places where I felt like I didn't fit. But when you're wallowing in that, you can either focus on that, or you can focus on, well, what can I do? What can I do? And if I can go somehow be a blessing to somebody, it helps. And if you're not connecting with people in person, what I was going to say is, as I've gone back through some of my crazy journey, only two jobs, and they were my first two early on, kind of out of college. I went 2 years and then dropped out. I had a full-time job offer, and then that job was from my internship, but it had no benefits, and it was $10,500 a year, and I was getting married the next year. And so I needed benefits.
Right.
So I applied for a job, and there were 100 people that applied for this job online, and it paid $11,500, and it did have benefits. So I'm like, oh, thank God. That one and one other job were the only two that I've ever gotten from an ad, ever.
Wow.
Every other job, and every job that I've had pretty much since then, especially when I came to Charlotte in 94, every job that I've gone for was master's preferred, bachelor's required. 2 years didn't cover the bachelor's. Okay.
Yep.
So, in every case, it was somebody who had worked with me and who knew me well that said, you need to meet Gary. And I think because people have been so gracious to me in that, I have this extra sensitivity to want to do the same thing for others.
I think that's very telling there as well, Gary. I think there's something to, if you've been helped, you want to help. If you've been served, you want to serve. But it's so key for people to, it's kind of like breaking the cycle. If you haven't witnessed that firsthand, you got to break the cycle at some point and do it yourself. Because the benefits are just tremendous. I mean, it just comes back to you tenfold or 100-fold. My
mentor, my first real professional mentor, or maybe he was my second, but he was a big dog. He was a who's who in the advertising business, and that's where I cut my teeth. I was a designer and then an art director and whatever. And then my first turnaround was an ad agency. And he was a living legend. He just passed away about a year ago. And I was in Minneapolis. He split time between New York and Minneapolis, and we were shooting some television commercials up there when I was with one of these banks. And I said, hey, Ron, I'm going to be in town. He goes, man, I would love to meet with you. And he takes me to this really fancy restaurant. I mean, he's kind of a godfather in that industry. And at dinner, I said, and I hadn't been even to a restaurant that fancy ever, you know. And I said, Ron, why are you being so kind to me? And he said, Gary, because somebody did it for me. And he said, the only thing that I ask of you is that you would do it for some other people. Pay it forward.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, you know, our topic today on networking, I mean, it's so true. You know, how does it, you know, when someone helps you up the ladder, make sure you reach back down and help someone else up. It's all about that. But I want to encourage people. We're on Facebook and we're on YouTube as well as here on LinkedIn, obviously. But any questions anyone has, please feel free to chime in with any questions for Gary. The other thing that I want to bring up, Gary, you mentioned that you were 53 when you were unemployed.
When I came back, yeah,
and 53.
Yeah.
Ageism is real, and
it's a real thing.
It's a real legit thing. I mean, I'm 50.
I don't want to admit it, but it's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and none of us want to admit it for sure, but it's a legit, real thing. So, how much of that, you know, in your networking, you know, when you were launching into that, how much of that did you witness, and how did you address or overcome it? If it's a fair question, you don't have to answer anything.
It's totally fair. First of all, I don't think that I encountered it as much because I wasn't going back into a public. Well, the firm that I got hired was a $600 million publicly traded company, but the big banks, like where I'd been, that becomes a whole lot more apparent. You know, really apparent. You know, they had the age of 50 or the rule of 50 or 55 or something like that at Bank of America when I was there, that you could retire at 55. Well, I'm like, you know, or if your experience and plus your age add up to 55, you can, you know, jettison or whatever. So that wasn't as much of an issue. And you can be a victim about anything if you want. And I refuse to be a victim. I look at Moses. He started his real career. He set a whole nation free at age 80 for another 40 years. He's more of who inspires me than the American model of, well, you know, you play your cards right and you're going to retire at 65 and then go play golf and probably be dead in 2 years because of boredom. Right. I've seen that. I want nothing to do with it. Even if I was a billionaire, I would keep working. That's one of the things I learned with these guys and gals in this super high net worth group of people, 300 families. Some of these guys could never spend all the money that they had. Never. The really rich guys, you wouldn't even know it. But they were all engaged. It didn't matter if they were in their 70s or 80s. They were still engaged in business somehow. And it wasn't for making and amassing more money for themselves. It was helping somebody else. It was because they wanted to be intellectually stimulated. They wanted, you know, and that's how I feel. I work out with guys that are half of my age, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm crushing them, or, you know, that they're not crushing me too badly.
Right.
And there's a point where you can't, but I work out with an 80-year-old guy on our Sunday afternoons, and he crushes everybody on abs, like everybody. Well, he inspires me, but so do the young guys. Like my podcast, I have a podcast co-host that's 31. He did his first turnaround at 24. I learned from him.
Nice.
So there's something about not giving lip service to diversity, but really embracing it. Like, I love learning from guys that are a lot older than me and my age, but I like looking at people that are way different and much younger, because they're doing stuff now that was not even in the consideration set of, you know, oh, you can make money doing that. Really?
Exactly. No, that's so true. I think that's so interesting to me because I've, you know, being in the industry that I'm in, there's so many people out there that say, I just don't want to work with millennials. You know, they just drive me crazy. They're this, they're that, they're whatever. And I'm like, I've met just as many people my age that are exactly that, what you just described. So I
It's
don't really think
mindset.
this,
It's
it is.
mindset. It's not age.
No, I mean, the more,
I
the
feel
more
more
things.
young today than I did when I was 25, and I'm
I'm
not
with you,
kidding.
brother. I'm with you.
I really do. I remember at 25, we had our first kid, and it was my 25th birthday party, and I thought, am I going through midlife crisis? I hope this isn't midlife, because I was kind of depressed. It wasn't because like I love my kid and didn't have two at the time yet, and love my wife, but it just felt like kind of lost. And again, I was stuck in a lot of imposter syndrome at that point because I kind of let my folks down. They were both college educated. I left a full ride scholarship, an academic scholarship, because it was the greatest unemployment in 1982 since the Depression. And my advisor said, you better take the job for $10,500 a year. But that was an albatross that was always around my neck, always,
Yeah.
And but today I'm like, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I know the kind of people I like hanging around. I know the kind of problems I love solving that I'm actually good at. And, you get kicked in the teeth a few times and you realize, well, okay, I can be gritty too.
Well, I think it's interesting to me because I think, like you were saying, it's not, networking can sound sleazy. It can sound salesy. It can, it can harken back to like used car, kind of
Yes.
deal. But in your case, and in just about everybody who I know is really good at it, it's not about networking. It's about connecting. It's about
It is about
having,
connecting.
learning. I think
That's exactly right.
the more curious you are, the better you are at what we call networking. How curious can you be about wanting to get to know people and wanting to understand how they tick and why they're doing what they're doing and what got them to where they are and things like that. I think that's a missed way of, looking at that term of networking.
Yeah. And that, whether it's millennials or whether it's networking versus connecting, it's mindset. And I'm not trying to be woo woo about it. There's a lot of woo woo out there, but it is about mindset. It's about, am I me focused or am I we focused? And if I'm me focused, first of all, you're going to smell it like that.
Yep.
And people are like, I don't have a job. I'm busy. I get it. But if we are we focused and we are, like what you said, intellectually curious, those are the people that I admire the most. And it's not just because the ones that were really wealthy, some of them I wouldn't trade them places because of challenges that go with that as well. And you may think, well, gosh, we had one, they had inherited 80 million. And the wife says, I'll never forget that day. I wish I could replay that day and make it go away.
Wow.
Literally. Because she said, you know what our friends' favorite sayings to us is? What their favorite saying is? And I said, what's that? It must suck to be you.
Yeah.
It must suck to be you. Comparison kills gratitude.
Yeah.
That's another thing I've learned. It kills gratitude. And if you can be curious about somebody, feel like you can learn from them, you're no longer in the comparison game.
Right. Well,
you're in the learning
game. That's such a key point that I don't want to miss, Gary, because I don't know if when you were going through that unemployment period, if there were others around you that were also unemployed that you were trying to help along the way. But I find that to be such a useful thing too. Like if you coalesce around just everyone's looking for a job, like if there's a group of unemployed people getting together, and I remember back in 2009, there was a group that I met at Paradise Bakery when Paradise Bakery existed. And they were all at a table and they saw my Phoenix staff shirt and they're like, hey, are you a recruiter? And I said, I am. And they were like, we're a group of unemployed people. We just kind of came together. We'd love to, if you could pull up a chair and join us and talk to us about resumes and, getting together and stuff. And I'm like, man, this is the best, these people are helping, but rooting for each other, I think is a core to that. You've got to celebrate other success. And to your point, you naturally seem like the kind of person that does that, but there's not a lot of people that naturally do that because of that comparison thing.
Well, it's very interesting. And listen, I've been there. I've been there when I see people passing me like speedboats and I'm in a rowboat. I'm like, man, when's my day going to happen? Or when's somebody going to remember me? And I remember feeling that way at times, but the only way I got out of that stinking boat going nowhere was like, you know what? I just got to be grateful for what I've got. I'm not grateful for this time of scariness. I'm not grateful for being unemployed. I'm not grateful for any of that, but I'm grateful for being alive. I got a wife and 2 kids that love me. I can walk. My dad lost a leg to polio when he was 17, so drug a leg through life. Just being able to walk normally and not have people stare at you is a blessing. Focus on that kind of stuff. And as soon as you start doing, it doesn't mean that you negate all the stuff that you're dealing with, but it puts it in perspective. And, if the groups, the one time that I've seen those groups become caustic is then when they become in this victim mentality and they, the system is against us. Gosh, look at us. There's no use for us white guys over 50 years old. Well, there may be some truth to that, but I'm going to refuse to believe that. Yeah. Colonel Sanders, he started, he was bankrupt and started when he was 59 or 60 or something like that.
Right. No, it's so true, man. It's so true. I think, and I think there's so much. I mean, you've got 40,000, I think, followers on LinkedIn right now.
Kind of close, pretty close.
So you're at that level right now, Gary, where you're kind of a brand. You're pretty. You have built yourself into a brand. I mean, and there are people who lean on you for support, lean on you for encouragement. I mean, I watch your LinkedIn feed now, and I mean, there's so many people that come to you and just. When you speak, they get encouraged, and there's something to that. But I don't know if it was always the case. I don't know if that was always Gary Frey, or if that's something that, again, with age and maturity and wisdom, that's.
Yeah. It's funny. One of my best friends says, out of our greatest pain becomes our biggest blessing to somebody else. And, the pain of betrayal. I've had a partner embezzle money. I've lost everything. Then years later, been through some heartache, right? And everybody has been. That's what I've learned with these super rich people. They all have stories. They all have heartache, and they can't tell very many people, but we all do. And it's part of the human condition, I think, right? And so I wrote a post 3-4 years ago. I only had a couple thousand followers. And followers, what does that mean? I mean, right. It's kind of ridiculous, I'm an influencer. We're all influencers, either for good or bad. Yeah. We're all ripple makers. Whatever you do has consequences. But I wrote this post to honor a guy because we had come to Charlotte. I discovered my partners in proprieties. Come bring a $2 million account to this guy and equity, and I'm giving equity. And after I deliver what I said I was going to, 6 months later, he goes, got what I need. Have a good life. He owed me 30 grand. He knew I'd forgiven about $250,000, and I had nothing. We had a few $1,000 to our name. And my wife was home with 2 little kids, 4-year-old and 7-year-old. And I was freaking depressed in a city I didn't know anybody. I'd poured my life into this little company done everything that I'd said. And it wasn't because I was perfect. It was just like, I felt like I was, I'm building something and then I get thrown out. And this guy asked me on the side of a soccer field, Gary, so what do you do? I'm in South Charlotte, which is a pretty kind of affluent area. I lived in the cheap seats of it, but I wanted to lie because I was too embarrassed. I didn't know anybody that was unemployed. And then you had to go physically stand in front of a government employee and tell them what you had done in order to try to get, I think it was like $500 a month or something like that. I couldn't even pay my bills with that, but nonetheless, yeah, it's humiliating. And so I tell him I'm unemployed. He goes, "Oh, well, what's your background?" I tell him, and he goes, "Hey, I'm consulting at this bank. They're re-engineering the marketing department. They're looking for somebody like you." And this 1,300 character post went viral. 8.3 million people read it. Like, it was crazy to watch it happen in LinkedIn. It took me literally 4 weeks, 2 hours a day to respond to every comment.
Wow.
4 weeks, 2 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week. And I was doing it to honor this guy because he's still a friend. That was in 1995. He
so
actually
awesome.
bought our house in South Park. He had gone through a divorce and ended up buying this house, and then we moved to another part of town. But I wanted to honor him, and I was ashamed to even I remember hitting send, and I was like, do I want to even do that? It's too vulnerable, whatever. Since then, we had a couple more that were, one that was about 8 million views and another one that was a couple million before they changed the algorithm. But through the course of those things, there are two people that reached out to me. One that said, from Africa, he was going to commit suicide that day.
Wow.
I mean, that's tough. And another guy here in Charlotte said, "Hey, I read your post. Would you meet with me?" Citadel grad, neat guy, but he had taken a couple dead end turns that felt like they had pushed him so far out of the channel, there was no getting back. And then I found out that he was like facing bankruptcy. This is months later. I started trying to help him, and he landed a great job. But what I didn't know is he said, "You don't know how deep of a hole I was in. My wife was going to leave me. We were going to declare bankruptcy. It was a dark, dark place for me." And I told my wife, and I let her read it. I said, if all the time that we've spent on LinkedIn does nothing else, then those two people, for the rest of my life, it would be worth it. And I'd still do it every day.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge, man. That is huge. No, I think and that speaks volumes to the fact that you don't know where people are. When they reach out to you, or when you reach out to them, you're dealing with your stuff, and everybody's got stuff. Like you said, every single one of us has heartache, but you don't know what the person at the other end of that message is dealing with at that time. And all it takes is grace and kindness to respond.
As Russ Johns, do you know Russ Johns?
No,
look him up because he's in your neck of the woods. He's in Arizona. I think he's in Phoenix too.
Okay.
Tucson. But he says kindness is cool and smiles are free. He has a thing called Pirate Network, and very intentional. But that's exactly right, man. I mean, and in the Instagram world where, hey, everything is great, or you do the most ridiculous things and embarrass yourself, and you've got millions of followers. And I know a couple people that they're very young. They're not even 30, and they're making over $1 million a year. And they do things that I would be embarrassed, like I'd want banished forever from the web. But hey, making $1 million, you know,
Yep.
well, good for you, I suppose. But, you know, we have this brief moment of time on this planet Earth. And, you know, it's like, what are we going to do with it? You know, is it me focused or is it we focused?
Right. No, I wish it was earlier in life that we recognize that.
Man, me too.
Which is why I love doing these, because I think if enough people hear it enough times from, you know, from guys our age, then maybe they'll start to recognize that, hey, maybe I should arrive at this destination a little earlier if I can get there earlier. And you can.
Yeah, that's really true. You know, my first real mentor, a guy named Don Brenton, lives in Scottsdale. He's 91. I just looked him up, and it was like, I guess he's still alive, which is awesome.
Right on.
But he hired me, and this was in like, gosh, 84, 85, something like that. And I was the youngest one, the youngest designer in this pretty talented group of people. And he said, and he really took me under his wing, and he said, you know, do you expect everything now? And I'm like, no, you know, I didn't come from anything anyway. He said, good. And he said, one of the things he said is like, and this was back in the early 80s, right? Yeah, a lot of people, young people, just expect everything now. They expect everything that their parents have now. And I didn't. I was just happy to be part of this much more accomplished group than I was. And he said, also, Gary, be careful on how you treat people on your way up, because on your way down, you're going to probably answer to them. And boy, within a year, one of our biggest clients, he was with a prestigious brand, but he was kind of hell on wheels. He was mean to the women that were the art directors running his piece of business, this and that. He was just imposing and boorish. Well, he lost his job. The company finally, you know, they'd had enough of him. Well, who did he call first? Us, begging for a job.
Yeah.
Needless to say, nobody was being, you know, rude, but they weren't going to do one bit to help him. Not one bit.
Right.
And, you know, that stuck in my mind. Like, wow, you know, this guy controlled us because it was our biggest account. And then boom. So
yeah,
it can happen to any of us.
Yep. No, and that was one thing that I wrote down. I mean, you know, from a networking perspective, I think the vendor community, you know, people that you've worked with. I mean, you know, we didn't really talk specifics about who you reached out to once you got to Charlotte or how you targeted those people. Because I always say, you know, look for people that are in your alumni network from any previous company you worked for. Look for people that, you know, are alumni of the university or school or high school or whatever that you went to. Your vendor community, your former coworkers, you know, all those kinds of people. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many people that just mistreat the vendors, and then when they find themselves, it's brutal.
Big time. Yeah. Or, you know, you've been involved in a church, you've been involved in some sort of a nonprofit, you've been involved in, I was involved with a pro sports team down here, that with the GM and whatever, and those people, right? I mean, but that was what, like, good people, if you're connecting with good people, they'll connect you with good people too.
Exactly. You know? Good people tend to hang out with good people.
Yeah. Darren Saul.
Exactly. No, it's beautiful. I mean, I think it's, you know, the takeaways for me is, you know, I'm not asking for a job. I'm looking to connect, you know, when you're unemployed, which I know a lot of people that are going to listen to this are, and you didn't like networking, but you love connecting, and be curious, you know, if your agenda is to learn, a lot of people want to teach. A lot of people want to talk.
Man, that is so true. And even kind of when I think about that soccer dad post that went crazy viral, it was being willing to be vulnerable. Now, I've also seen people that just throw up, you know, all their dirty secrets online, like, I'm not sure that, you know, but being willing, again, it comes down to motive. When I honestly look at why did I do it, I wanted to honor Jim Manley. I wanted to honor him. And then when it started going crazy, I said, Jim, check this out. This is crazy. You're famous. And I didn't use his name. And a lot of times I won't use names unless I get permission, first of all. But my other second famous, you know, 7.9 million, and it's clipped over 8 million. But it was about my best boss at Nations Bank, now Bank of America. She's not online. She's very low profile. I did not reveal her name. And I had people go, oh, you just made that story up. Well, I went up to the 50+ story of into her penthouse suite office, and I had this big graphic that I had done of all of the, it was actually a photo montage of all these comments around the world. It was like, you know, 50,000 people, but ones that I thought were so impactful. And I had the post in the middle, and I said, you need to know, because she's terrified of leaving that place because she's known no life outside of that bank, and she's done extremely well. But I said, there's so much need for leadership like you. You need to know the impact that you've had, and it's gone around the world. And that's, you know, man, that has so much impact. We each have so much impact that we don't know. We just don't know, you know, how are we treating the guy picking up trash every day? You know, how we don't know.
Right.
And, you know, so anyway, I've been needing guys like you way too many times in my life, you know, and before I get drug into some like business that I don't know anything about. And they're like, we need you. Why? So anyway,
no, like you said, the ripple, you know, the ripple effect is huge. It's tremendous. And you don't know the impact you're going to have, but I know that I appreciate Darren Saul, who I told you, I mean, one of the hardest conversations in my life, in my career was with that man. It was a difficult conversation, but I'm so glad I had it because it made me better. And
yeah,
it kept us as friends, but it was a tough.
You know, isn't that interesting? That you can have a deep relationship and friendship with somebody that had to deliver some really difficult truths.
Oh yeah.
And it's a special person that can have that and separate the deficiency from the person. I'm going to have a beer in about 45 minutes with a buddy of mine that I had to fire from Bank of America. And and he's a year older than me. He has his master's, I think, from Northwestern. His resume was like, I would have died for that resume. And my boss told me, hey, you're going to have to fire him. And I'm like, oh, please, because he had little kids, as I did. And when he's now in California, and he's a client of ours, but he would introduce me when we were still here in Charlotte, even a couple years ago. He'd go, yeah, this is Gary. He used to be my boss. He had to fire me. He fired me just to rub it in my face. Right.
Right.
But I was like, oh, please no. And I said to my boss, is there any way that we can keep him anywhere? And because he was so accomplished, he was very, very good. But he was so much of a trailblazer that he was almost like this big Great Dane walking through a china shop. And the big tail was wagging, happy, slobbering over everything, and knocking china, off the shelves. That was kind of him. So I'm like, well, what can we do? So I begged for the best package we could give him, again, because his wife was home. My wife was home with our little kids too. Like, I just felt so bad. So I take him across the street and we go have a beer and tell him what's going on. And he was mad and sad and all those things at the same time. But he went out and doubled his salary shortly thereafter. And now he's the CEO of a company. It's a really good technology company. He needed to be in technology, and because he was always a leading edge, he was actually a bleeding edge technology adopter. Well, you can have those conversations and still remain friends.
Yep.
And I think the relationships are all the things that really matter anyway. And what people don't know is, like, and I've seen it at some of the big banks and in big companies as well that I've worked with. If you become so insular that it becomes your terrarium, and it's all about who's reporting to who, and am I reporting to that guy or whatever. And then when that merry-go-round stops and you haven't been connecting outside of the terrarium, it's going to be a rude awakening. Right.
Yep. No, so true.
And it doesn't mean that, life as we know it is over, but you got a hill that you got to climb.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I mean, that's why I'm doing this series. I want people to understand networking is not I'm unemployed and I better get out there and network thing. Networking, building relationships, making connections, commenting on stuff, learning about people, growing, the influence that you have and that others have on you. That's an all the time thing in today's day. You have to be doing it all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Plus, it's fun. I mean, even if you're an introvert, look at Mark Metry on LinkedIn, man. I mean, he's got, I don't know how, he's probably got a few 100,000 followers at this point. And he's a young guy. He's in his mid-20s or something like that. But he wrote a book called Screw Being Shy. He's an introvert, and he was bullied and whatever, but he's using that platform. And if some of the best networkers that I've met, or connectors, let's use connectors, are introverts.
Yep.
Because they aren't looking to be the life of the party, or, hey, let's do a business card exchange, and hey, you call me and I'll call you. No, they are genuinely interested in people, and they're intentional about what they do. And it may be harder for them. They may be more exhausted after it's all said and done. Got it. But they're being who they are. And what's interesting too is you start here, you become more, or at least I have become a lot more comfortable in my own skin by writing and stuff like that I'm not writing to impress anybody. I'm not writing to sell anybody. I'm not meeting with somebody so that you can buy my stuff. Yeah, I got quotas and stuff like that. I'll make people aware of it, and I'll attract the ones that need what we do. But it goes back to mindset. What's motivating you?
Yep.
Why?
Yeah, there's another guy, Matthew Pollard, out of Austin. I don't know if you know him, but he also just wrote a book on introverts and connecting as an introvert. But yeah, it's such a critical thing. It's so important to do, and hopefully, we're helping people understand that there's ways to do it that aren't schmarmy. There's ways to do it that don't have that ick.
I have the cringe, and you can see it, you can smell it when it's, hey.
Right.
Yeah.
Fun. I hate that.
Me
I want to
neither.
exit that quick.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Well, Gary, I can't thank you enough for being with me today, buddy. I really appreciate
Man, it's
it.
fun. Thank you so much. And thank you, Darren Saul, for making this
Thank you, Darren
introduction.
Saul. Exactly. And I appreciate whoever tuned in or is tuning in after it goes live, after it gets recorded, I guess. Or
so do you then repost it later on after it's live? I've never done.
Stays in my feed forever. So
how cool.
Yeah, this will be in the feed forever. So we'll see comments on it and likes on it and stuff like that as it's just sitting there for people to watch. So
very cool. Well, thank you for what you do to help others out there, because there are a lot of people that have been hit, especially with this COVID thing, where it had nothing to do with them and they're struggling out there.
Yep.
And I remember in 2009 when, holy moly, everything's blowing up. And I had friends that they were doing well in the middle of it, but I also had friends that were also looking too, and, somebody else's misery doesn't help you,
Right.
I don't find solace in somebody else's misery, but, we do need one another. We were created to be in fellowship with one another, I think. And, so I appreciate what you're doing, because, the worst thing that you can do is give up hope.
Yep, for sure. Hey, Chris, thank you for your comment, and everyone else who was here. We appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words, Gary. I appreciate you being here and helping in this effort, my friend. Thank you.
I applaud your efforts. So I'm going to have to try to go into that realm at some point too. So thank you for what you do.
Right on.
And I will thank Darren. I'll give him a shout yet today.
Awesome.
For making this connection. So
we'll
thank you
again.
TGIF.
We'll do a TGIF on Darren.
Totally grateful. It's Friday. FREYDAY.
Exactly. Looking forward to that tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow actually is a sobering one, because it's a 9/11 tribute. I was there on 9/11, and I will never, ever, ever, ever forget what that was like. And I wasn't in the towers, but I was in the streets with the people from the towers. And so,
wow.
My gratitude goes to those first responders and the people that run into burning buildings, So, but Darren's soul will have to be, I'm totally grateful for Darren's soul one of these Fridays. And I'm grateful for you. Totally grateful. Thank you.
You as well, Gary. You as well. Thank you again, my friend.
You too. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.